I've had people that I've gone through the entire divorce, written up a judgment, and then a couple weeks later, they're like, you're not going to believe this. We went out for like a celebratory dinner to just say like, thanks for everything, whatever. And we ended up having sex and now we're back together.
Oh, of course. Wait, but that seems like that's just toxic. That's going to end in divorce.
I'm not a therapist. I don't get involved. I'm like, all right, be careful. You've got a judgment. And now you're literally at the point where you could just start dating again if you wanted to. You've got no legal entanglements. So see what you think.
I'm Susan Yara, and welcome to My Life Online. We're going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot together. Many of you know that I've been going through a divorce, and in this process of finding a divorce attorney, I started to realize they have a lot of insight into what causes a marriage to end, because this is what they're dealing with every single day. So for today's episode, I thought I would not only bring in a divorce attorney, but the divorce attorney. She is such a badass. Her name is Laura Wasser, and she is truly the go-to for most of the high-profile divorces in Los Angeles. She's agreed to share some of her time with us to actually talk about what she has seen, and I think it's going to be a really fun episode for anybody who is considering divorce, or even better, maybe you're trying to actually save your marriage and you just want to know what this advice might be. Laura, I am so happy to have you here. I'm honored to have you here because I know you're a busy woman, but you have so much insight when it comes to divorce and relationships. So I thought it'd be a really great treat for our viewers.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to share.
So I'm just going to hop right into it because what I really have noticed when it comes to divorce attorneys, family attorneys, is that you see what breaks down the relationship, because this is obviously why people are coming to you. So what would you say is maybe like the top 3 reasons why relationships, marriages don't work?
Well, I would say communication. I think a failure to communicate is going to be the biggest problem. I think people get married, and it used to be, in the 1920s and 30s till death do us part, but people died a lot earlier then. And I feel like now people are constantly evolving, and sometimes they evolve in different directions. And if you're able to communicate, participate in some kind of couples counseling, even before you get married, and get the tools that you need to deal with things when they may not be so great, I think that's huge. And so whatever the issues are, if you're having financial issues, if you're having parenting issues, if you're having work issues, if you're able to then figure out a way to communicate with your partner about those things, you will generally be able to talk your way through it and be okay. And if you're not, and you end up splitting up, the hope is that you still have a relationship with that person, that they always have your back, they're your greatest ally, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I have heard this communication conversation, right? And I've been told this, several times that it's all about communication. But I know for myself and also for a lot of my friends, we felt like we over communicated, right? Like we were constantly communicating how we were feeling, but it just felt like it either we weren't being heard or that, our partner just didn't want to, I guess, do anything about it.
Both people have to participate. And also, I do think it's helpful to have kind of a neutral involved, like a third party, whether it's a counselor or a therapist or a religious, whether a priest or a rabbi, or when it comes to actually like, okay, maybe we're going to split up, a mediator. And sometimes people have like been able to talk things through finally with a third person in the room that has kind of an objective opinion about things. And they go, oh, well, maybe we can actually work this out. So I do. Yes, both people have to be into the idea of communicating. Talking to yourself isn't going to do any good. And also, I think it is helpful if there's somebody else there that's like, wait a minute, what you just said, that's not really quite fair, and here's why. I mean, so calling you on it and kind of directing the conversation and making sure both people are participating, I think is essential.
Have you had clients that come in and they're like ready for a divorce, and then the more they go through the process with you, they actually back out of it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I've had people get back together.
How often is this a thing?
Not often, but I would say like, in 30 years, it's maybe happened like 10 or 11 times. And sometimes I can even tell when, it's usually one party. It's unless that's my mediation clients where they're both in. But it's one party and I'm like, I don't know if this is over yet. I mean, and I've had people that I've gone through the entire divorce, written up a judgment, and then a couple weeks later, they're like, you're not going to believe this. We went out for like a celebratory dinner to just say like, thanks for everything, whatever. And we ended up having sex and now we're back together.
Oh, of course. Wait, but that seems like that's just toxic. That's going to end in divorce.
I'm not a therapist. I don't get involved. I'm like, all right, be careful. You've got a judgment. And now you're literally at the point where you could just start dating again if you wanted to. You've got no legal entanglements. So see what you think.
Yeah. So when people are going through the divorce process, what are some of the big issues that seem to come up?
Well, custody is always the first. If you've got kids, that's always going to be the first thing that you're concerned about. Sharing custody, how that works. I mean, now in 2025, I think the entire country, but certainly California, Florida, and New York are really understanding the idea that it's good for a child to have frequent and continuous contact with both parents, not just mom. And again, unless there's something very wrong with one of the parents, they're probably going to be sharing about equal custody. That is assuming they're living nearby and the kid's not going to be having to get on a plane every week or whatever. And then it's the finances. And what we kind of say is like the four corners of a divorce, financially speaking, are going to be what you have, your assets, what you owe, your debts, what you spend, your expenses, and what you earn, your income. And so we have people kind of map those out. And then you start talking about who's going to, if we're going to sell the house or we're going to live, one of us is going to live in the house. And what will the proceeds be if we sell it? And how do we split that? And then kind of what is the budget going to be in terms of whether it's child support or spousal support?
Yeah.
So those are really the three big issues. And then, of course, within those issues, there's tons of subsets in terms of where are our kids going to go to school? Do we let them, how much screen time do we let them have? Are they going to be able to have piercings before they turn 18? All those things with kids. And then you've got the money. Who's paying for what? Where are we living? What are we going to dissolve any of our 401ks? How does that work with taxes? So, you start to learn, especially people that weren't particularly interested or privy to the financial information during the marriage, really learn it. And a lot of women, I will say, don't participate throughout the marriage in that. And what I say, and they're like, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe this. I'm an educated woman. I didn't ever participate. And I said, well, this is going to be your chance and you're going to learn everything about this. And in your next chapter, you're going to be kind of the master of your own destiny in terms of how much you have and what you invest and what you spend and how your budget goes and all that. So this is a great opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things that I see a lot of the time when some of my girlfriends, for instance, are telling me that they would like to get a divorce, but they're the stay-at-home mom, right? And they don't have their own finances anymore. Do you think that women should be I hear people say this all the time, like have your own finances no matter what. But they're kind of in these situations where they've been doing this forever. They're like years into being a stay-at-home wife, right? And a mom. And now they don't feel like they're going to have exactly the kind of finances that they currently have. So they'd rather deal with their relationship. What advice would you give them from what you've seen?
I would say at least if you're not going to go back out and get into the job market again and start earning your own income, then I would at least say to have a conversation with your spouse and say, listen, our kids are now kind of in school full time. I'm not like, breastfeeding or taking them to playgroup anymore. I'd like to play a more participatory role in our finances. I'd like to be able to come once a quarter to the accountant or business manager with you. I'd like to get up to speed. It'll be helpful for our relationship. You're always complaining I spend too much. Now I'll have some certain parameters. And I'd like to kind of help out with some of this stuff. If he says no, or if it's a reverse gender thing and she says no, I think that's a problem. Why isn't he or she letting you see what's going on, letting you participate? In most situations, the earner spouse is very happy to say, please come, make an effort. It would be great if I had somebody else that was doing like the Quicken or the bill pay, or even if you're wealthy enough that you have a business manager that's kind of talking to the business manager, that would be amazing. And I will say personally, some of the best relationships that I've seen, friends of mine who are now married 20-something years, are relationships where they're both participating and where even if there's only one spouse that's earning the income, the other one is really in charge of a lot of the financial planning in the family. And I think that keeps them as a partnership.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you seen a lot of these like as you're going through the process with a client and you obviously see like their financial affidavits, you see a lot of the issues that have come up. Are there things that people should maybe be considering before they even get married that might not be an issue as the stuff that you see?
I mean, and again, for young women today, particularly that are getting married, that have the benefit of hearing from us older women, I would absolutely say, even if you don't get a prenuptial agreement, you should have the conversations that you would be having if you did. You should say, listen, I've got student loan and I want you to know about that because we're going to be paying it off during our marriage. Or, gee, how much do you want to be putting away each year for savings so that at some point we can retire? College accounts for our kids. I'm always amazed that people are married 10, 15 years and they have no estate plan. I'm like, we should be talking about this. So having an understanding, and again, they are not the sexiest conversations at all, but having them before you get married, I think is really helpful. And if you are in a state that kind of recognizes that what you bring into the marriage is your separate property, and you do have some separate property coming in, maybe you say, hey, why don't we each keep what's separate, and then we'll create a joint account for when we are married, whatever. Then you always have your little nest egg, and that might be a nice thing for you.
Why is it so hard for us to have these kinds of conversations? Finances are so awkward.
Yes, and they really are. It's just icky and it's not fun. And I get it, and I talk about it all the time. But when it comes to actually practicing what I preach, personally, it's difficult for me too. I don't know, but you kind of have to break through it. I'm not saying on the first date you should be like, so how much do you make, and can I see a financial statement or whatever? But I definitely think one of the things that's kind of organically in the conversation would be, I mean, you can see kind of a car a person drives, where they live, that's the kind of stuff. Then you can say like, hey, listen, I just wanted to say like, I am working really hard and I want to aspire to be this in my career. What's your plan? Or, what are you thinking about where we would be vacationing? I remember when I was in my, I think, early 30s, I had a boyfriend and I had been a lawyer for a while already. And we were going to go on a trip. I think we were just going like up to the Bay Area because he was a Stanford alum and I'm a Cal alum. And he was like, yeah, we're going to go up there. Da, da, da. And I said, well, where are we staying? Because I knew what the hotels were in there. And he's like, oh, we're staying on my buddy's futon. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm 30 years old and I will never sleep on a futon again. And like, again, that didn't end the relationship, but it certainly set some boundaries. And I don't think that he thought like, wow, what a bitch, whatever. I'm 30 years old,
Yeah.
So you have to really know how you feel and what you want. And that will change as you get older. 25, I would have been down for a futon any day.
Yep.
30, not so much. And then as you get older, I think it's important to self-reflect and see what's okay for you. And don't be so stringent that, if it was one night and then we went to a hotel, I could probably, depending on how much I drank, I guess I could have slept on a futon, but know what you want. And then like we said, communicate it.
The whole prenup conversation, I feel like, is coming up a lot more with me and my girlfriends these days because women are starting to become breadwinners or make a lot more money or have more assets than they used to back in the past. For a lot of us, like when we were in our 20s, maybe we got married like in our late 20s or early 30s, we were maybe on the cusp of something big happening in our careers. So we didn't have husbands sign prenups.
Right.
It didn't even occur to us because we didn't have any assets,
right.
really. What do you think about that? Is that something you can do even if you don't really have much to offer at the moment?
Yeah, because if you think what's going to happen in the future is that you're going to make a lot of money, then you might want to say, I've worked very hard up to this point. I'm going to continue working hard. And I don't know that I want 50 cents of every dollar to be something that you're entitled to if we split up. Now, again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I've represented people who, when they got married, one party was earning a lot more and was kind of protecting his or her. And what ended up happening is that the agreement totally inured to the benefit of the party who had kind of signed a lot of stuff away because now they kept all that money. So you really have to think about it. And things change. You could be such a badass powerhouse in your job, and then you have a kid and you're like, I don't think I want to go back to work. It happens, And so now all of a sudden things are different. So you have to also have room within your relationship, if not necessarily your prenup, to say, I know that I said all these things, but I'm feeling very differently now. And can we talk that through?
Do you feel like there are huge differences in why women get divorced? Like why they initiate the divorce versus why a man initiates the divorce?
I think it's too general. I think that it depends really. I think the way that we see the differences is the roles. So if you are the breadwinner, I think a lot of time you initiate a divorce because you're really frustrated that the other person isn't challenging you or stimulating you or, figuring out a way to make you feel, the way you guys did kind of when you first got together. And I think if you're the other person and you're a stay-home non-earner, whatever, you're not feeling good about yourself. You're feeling that he or she is constantly working too much, not paying enough attention to the family, coming home and making it seem as though, oh God, I worked so hard. Well, what have I been doing here all day with 3 kids and cleaning? And, and even if you're a person that has nannies and housekeepers and chefs, you're still organizing those people. Like that's a job. So I think resentment is something that comes in, and I think it happens to both genders, but I really do think it depends what the roles in the family are. And look, I'm the first one to say there are roles, and every relationship is kind of a transactional contract, which may change throughout the marriage. But you do this, I do this, this is how we roll. Okay. And if that changes at some point, because now the kids are in school, or I want to work a little bit less, or look what's happened even in Southern California over the past 4 years. We've had COVID. We've had, professional strikes where people that are in, a lot of the people we handle are in the entertainment industry. Their income has massively changed. We've had fires. I mean, there's been so many changes that people have had to kind of work through that, of course, if you can't navigate that change, you're going to have to figure out a different change.
I think for women, I'm speaking from, I guess, like personal experience, also friends. A lot of the time we feel like we're doing both roles now.
Sure.
Right? Like we're doing all the mom work, right? And then we're also breadwinners,
right,
or making as much money as
right,
our husbands or our partners, right? So I think that seems to be a common
resentment.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And again, I speak to groups of women and I'll say, okay, how many of you in here, they're all professional women. How many of you have kids? They always ask. And how many of you are working a 40-hour plus work week, but you're still making the lunches, making the pediatrician appointments, signing up for the extracurricular activities? If you're not driving, you're finding someone else to drive. And they all raise their hands. And I said, now, how many of you are doing that because you just know you do it better than he does? And they all raise their hands. And I think we have to examine that, which is we do it because we want to. We know we do it better. Sometimes they're even willing to help and they'll start and you're like, oh, you're just doing it wrong. Move. We know we do it better and we want to do it because for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, because it's cool to be able to spend time with your kids. If we really didn't want to make the lunches or if we really weren't the control freaks that wanted to be there for the pediatrician appointments, and maybe there's a level of guilt too. But again, we want to be there for our kids. We want to feel like that parent. And I now know a lot of dads that feel that way too. But I feel like as women, we have to also examine, hey, he would do it. We just want to do it because we know we do it better and we like it. And now again, some of us are like, he's a fucking moron and he'd never do it the right way, so I'm not going to let him do it. But a lot of times we kind of take over that responsibility because we want to. And if we do cede a little bit of that control, maybe it is more of an equal partnership.
Do you find that people are getting their divorces after they have kids, or it's just whenever in the relationship? Or do kids play a big factor in these divorces?
I think kids play a big factor. And it's also interesting, different from like, the 60s and 70s where dad had, every other weekend and Wednesdays. Now we're seeing dads play a much bigger role, have a lot more equal time. And I think also we're seeing kids, it was such a taboo subject. My older son, his dad and I split up when he was about 2. And so when he started kindergarten, I think we were the only family in the class where the parents weren't together. And by the time we were in 4th grade, it was like 40% of the kids.
Right.
And Luke, because he really didn't know anything different than that, would be the one that the kids would come talk to if their parents were splitting up. And again, it's just not as crazy as it used to be anymore to have kids that are living in 2 different homes. They're used to it. They see it on TV. They see it in the movies. They see it with their friends. There's kind of a sweet spot if you can do it before a certain age. And again, this depends on the kid. It's better. There are some kids that kind of grow up with a fear. Oh my God, are my parents going to get divorced? Is it going to be my fault? What can I do to keep them together? But I see a lot less of that now. And I also see it's a very narrow, it's a kind of, because the other thing is once they get to be adolescents or teens, they don't care. They care about themselves and what they're doing. And if there's an opportunity to be at 2 different houses and have 2 different iPads or whatever, even better. So again, and when they're really little, they don't care because like I said, they don't know any better. If you make it okay for your kids, it's going to be okay for your kids. But I think some people have a hard time doing that. I think it really is difficult, depending on whatever the anger and resentment issues were during the marriage, to just be totally chill about like, okay, I'm going to share time with you. And because people can be inconsiderate. And so if you're being not treated with consideration, like your time isn't important, you're going to be not thrilled about that.
Yeah. So when you're going through that divorce process, you're just kind of initiating it. If you're the person initiating it, I feel like it's really hard to, one, go to your spouse and say, I want a divorce and explain everything. But then can you get them out of the house immediately? Like, can you say,
No.
now leave?
No, that's what's really hard. So, and again, I can't speak to the laws in all states, but in California, you cannot get what's called a kick-out order unless there's been domestic violence, which is like, God forbid, you don't want that. So, and even if it's your house and when you guys got married, the other person moved into it, it's the family residence. So it's very, very difficult to get somebody out of your house. So generally, if you're thinking about this, I would definitely figure out a plan that has kind of an interim that says, okay, how about for a certain period of time we nest, which is the kid stays in the house, you have a week and he has a week. And so the kid's not disrupted. And for a week, you're able to go, I don't know if you stay with a friend or a parent or even just get another apartment, depending on your financial situation. And that the kid's in the house the week with the spouse, and then you switch out. And that lasts for a certain period of time until we figured out what the financial distribution is going to be, because then someone's going to have to move out or both of you are. Or you say, if you really can't stand him, I'm going to move out, but I still want to figure out some kind of a custody plan because we're going to have to share and whatever. There's no such thing as abandonment, at least in California. So you can move out of a house, even if it's yours or half yours, without anybody saying, she abandoned us. You can just say, I need to be somewhere else. I don't want to be with you. I'd prefer for you to move, but I can't kick you out, so I won't. But it's why having some of these, a little bit of a ducks in a row plan before you have the conversation is good. Because a lot of times if people are, I always hear people say they were blindsided. I never understand how anybody can be blindsided. You have to know if things aren't going well. So to say like, oh my God, I was so blindsided, I couldn't believe it. I also do think, and I recommend a lot for people who come to me and go, I don't know how to have this conversation. I say, book 4 or 5 sessions with a therapist and maybe say to the therapist before, I want you to know, I don't think this marriage is going to survive, but we're going to come here and we're going to talk about it. And maybe after 3 sessions, I'll have some epiphany and we'll be able to work it out. But more likely is after a few sessions, I'm going to say, with you in the room, therapist, and here's the reason why I think we need to get to divorce. And the next couple of sessions, I would like to talk about how we plan on doing that in an amicable and cost-effective way. Now you've got someone there who's trained. They're not a lawyer, so they're not going to lawyer up or anything like that, but you're going to work out, okay, what are the boundaries around this? We're separating. This just happened. When are we going to tell our kids and how? You don't want one person telling them without the other. Who's going to stay in the house? Are we dating yet? How does that work? Are we dating and introducing the new person to our kids yet? All of these things that aren't really legal, but having the other person's opinion, talking about it, and then having this neutral come in and go, ho, 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 wait a minute. I think the therapist can kind of be a voice of reason. Again, it doesn't have to be a therapist, I'm saying this, but it's just a third party that's there to go, wait a minute, hold on a second. I understand boundaries are important, but just have some ground rules. And it doesn't, like I said, the dating police aren't going to come arrest you if you breach this. But if you both can kind of go into this in a way that you're being considerate of the other, you're cooperating with the other, you're communicating with the other, I mean, I think that's huge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've heard you kind of say like this third party or a therapist situation a lot. Do you think that people before they even get married should maybe have this therapy session?
Yes. I mean, like a lot of religions, I think the Catholic Church and I know Judaism, you have to meet with a, whatever they call them, person of the cloth, whatever, before they'll do the ceremony. I think that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for love and romance and all that stuff. But when you're planning a wedding, you're like meeting with the caterer, you're meeting with the wedding coordinator, you're meeting with the, florist and the person that makes the cake and all this stuff. And yet you're not really meeting with somebody who's talking about, well, what happens after that magical day? How are we going to figure out the rest of our lives? Shouldn't we discuss that stuff? I mean, I know so many people come in, we never had a conversation about what religion we were going to raise our kids. We never had a conversation about what would happen if like one of our parents needed to be put, in a home or something like that. Now, you don't want to think about those things, but if you're going to be with this person for the rest of your life, you should, and you should talk about it.
Do you feel like a lot of your clients come in and they probably should have gotten a divorce way sooner?
Maybe. I mean, again, I only get them when I get them, but when I hear their stories, and it's interesting, everyone has a story, everybody, and a lot of the times the stories completely align. They're both saying the exact same thing. It's just, and I'm like, why didn't you address this? They wait for the kids, they wait for the right time, just like we waited a certain amount. When is it going to be the right time to get married or have kids? Now it's when is it going to be the right time to get divorced? And there may never be a right time. It's when it's right for you, I think.
I mean, even for myself, I remember thinking, okay, wait, definitely the kids, they're young. I don't want to separate them. The thought of sharing custody where I don't get them every single day was a big one for me.
I had hearing their little feet in the morning come in next to the bed and say, good morning, Mommy. No, it's like, ugh.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then then you have your first date. You have your first night in your house by yourself where there's nobody crying and nobody by you. You take a bath, you have a glass of wine and you're like, okay. I mean, I have so many girlfriends that are married. They're like, I wish I had your life. Like, I can't believe right now I'm doing homework, cleaning the kitchen, whatever. Like, and you're like kid free, watching whatever you want to watch on TV as loud as you want. Maybe you take your dish downstairs, maybe you don't.
Yeah. Well, you've been through a divorce yourself, right?
Well, I was married very briefly when I was 25, and then I've got 2 kids with 2 people to whom I was not married. And so I never had a bad divorce because I never had a very long marriage. But yes, I've had breakups and I've had, the legal entanglements and all that.
Do you think you would get, now that you've had the experience of seeing so many divorces, would you ever get married again?
No.
Why? Like I said, this is a good question then. Why not?
Why would I?
Yeah.
I mean, what is the reason to get married? For
Yeah.
me, I definitely would like to be in a monogamous long-term relationship. I love having a significant other, but I mean, I've got pictures of myself at the Bel Air Hotel when I was 25 years old getting married, and I will never look better than that. So why would I want to do it again? No, I can't see any reason. And I see why other people do. If it's a matter of protection, security, there's, immigration reasons, religious reasons. I get it. I love a wedding. Invite me. I'll come. I just do not see, and I can't imagine any reason that I would want to get married.
So I said this for years, even when I wasn't going through divorce. My ex-husband and I both agreed. Why would we ever want to get married again? But now that I'm single, right? And I've started dating and I meet people, you meet a lot of people who haven't been married. So you can't even begin to explain why you wouldn't want to get married, because to them, they're still in this like mindset of like, this is the most romantic thing to do. Why wouldn't we want to get married, right?
I think you just have to go with the don't fix it if it ain't broken. Like,
Yeah.
we're having such a great time right now. Why would we get married? I mean, and you have to ask them, like, why is it important to you? I want to know that you're mine and that we're the only ones for each other. Okay, we can do that. We can even live together. Why are we going to get married and let the state control this union? Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
If someone can explain it, I'm open. I just haven't heard it yet. I'm
Yeah.
56.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I get it. When people are deciding they want to get a divorce, do they have to actually list a reason?
I've been hearing a lot of rumblings. Most states right now it's what's called no fault. So
Yep.
when you get divorced, you just check the box, irreconcilable differences. Like, it's just not working. But back in the day, like, California was the first state, I think in 70 something, we went to no fault divorce. But before that, you have to put a reason that you're getting divorced, whether it was, adultery or whatever. And it was made for a lot of finger pointing, and it also made that whatever the reason was would then determine what the property settlement or the support would be. And so you just had a lot of people making allegations about things. You'd see in the movies like a photographer busts into a hotel room and the woman's there in bed and they're taking pictures or whatever. These days with Photoshop, it would kind of be impossible to
True.
use that evidence as anything. But I am hearing a lot that many states are trying to go back to what's called a fault regime, which would probably be great for divorce attorneys because we'd all make so much more money just stirring the pot from other people's conflicts. But it would be terrible for most litigants getting divorced. Now, the reason that it's the conservative right thinking about doing it is because they're all about family values and keeping people together, which I don't know if you can put that toothpaste back in the tube in this day and age. If you're not happy, you're not happy. And so staying together is probably not the right answer, particularly because for whatever reason, usually the woman is going to be precluded from getting a divorce if it's a fault state.
Will you explain what no fault or fault states are? Because sometimes I think people hear this and they're like, oh, what's that mean?
Right. Well, so I think right now I think Louisiana you can opt in to fault, but almost all the states right now are no fault, meaning judges don't want to hear about all the terrible things that either person did. Every state now is no fault. And what I'm hearing is that they're thinking about changing it. And if they do, it will make divorces much more difficult,
Messy.
much more expensive. And also, you try to move through this process amicably so that after it's done, and I say to people all the time, don't say something. You're going to know, if you have kids particularly, you're going to know this person for the rest of your life, not just till your kid turns 18 or graduates from high school. You're going to walk them down the aisle together. You're going to be in the waiting room after they have babies together. You need to figure out a way to remember that this person's your family. And as much as you might dislike them at the moment, you got to find the love somewhere. So I think it will be very difficult if we go back to that. I think it's not a good thing overall. And that's coming from someone who stands to financially benefit from it if it happens. My whole reason for doing this and continuing to work and talking on podcasts like yours is to educate people and make it so that it's more of a discussed subject, more relatable, and something, because it's happening. We have had a divorce rate that hovered around 50% for the past, I think, 15 years in this country. It's happening.
Right.
And if it's happening, how do we do it in a way that makes it less painful, less expensive, and easier to kind of move on to the next chapter, as opposed to making it, more ugly and more expensive?
Can you actually go through a divorce that's not very expensive?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got divorce.com. There's also a company called Hello Prenup if you want to do an inexpensive prenuptial agreement or find out about prenuptial agreements before you get married. They're a great resource. But then also, even if you're a person who says, I don't have the time to do it yourself divorce, whatever, still go see a mediator. We have retired judges. I have very few cases that I actually try in court for like week-long trials because it's prohibitively expensive and we can't get in there. If I wanted to set a case for trial today, March 4th, I probably wouldn't get heard until next year.
Right.
So all that time working up into it, then we're in court all of these days. You can probably work this out. It's not rocket science. I mean, it's not fun, but like I said, there's the four corners, the schedule of assets, debts, income, and expenses. You're dealing with your kids. Isn't there a way that you can figure it out with the help of somebody that knows the law, whether that's 2 lawyers and a retired judge, 1 mediator, however you're doing it, once you have enough information? Hey, this is kind of, I mean, when somebody comes in my office and tells me their things, I'm like, this is probably how it's going to play out. There's some varietals, but pretty much this is how it's going to play out. Why would you let somebody else take the control of your entire situation? Somebody that's sitting up there on the bench that doesn't know you or your family. You know it. He or she knows it. We're going to educate whoever's the neutral in this, and we're going to mediate it out.
Got it. So you're saying try to mediate it.
Totally.
Try not to take it to court.
Totally. And I think any family law attorney that you go see that doesn't say that first is not doing his or her job.
That's actually a good. Can I actually ask what do you think would be some of the things to look for if you are finally like, you know what, I've tried to make it work. We're going to get a divorce. I need an attorney. What should they look for?
I actually think it's very important, even in this day of Zoom and phone or whatever, to go meet with somebody, to sit down across from them. As surreal of as an experience it is to go into an office and pay for valet parking and sit there and be like, oh my God, I'm in a divorce lawyer's office. This is just so weird. I think it's important to get that vibe. Not only is this somebody you're going to be dealing with, that's kind of your spirit animal guiding you through the divorce, but then that person is also at some point either going to be relating to the other lawyer, the mediator, and if worse comes to worse, the judge. So what's their demeanor? How are they? Were they on time for your meeting? Were they polite to you? Did you gel with them? And also I would say an important thing is usually there's going to be somebody else in their office working on your case, whether it's an assistant, a paralegal, or a younger attorney.
Right.
When you're in there, say, who's that person? I want to see that person because I'm hoping to talk to that guy that charges less than you, maybe more often than you. I would ask, are you going to be in court if we have to go to court? Are you going to be the one that's actually representing me? I have great confidence in someone else doing the legwork if you've hired them and you like them, but will that be you? I would see how they explain things. Do they explain things in a really legalese way that you don't understand, you walk out feeling more confused and stupid, or do they explain it in a way that you're like, okay, I get it, and if I forget something, I'm not going to be embarrassed to call her back and ask her, wait, I know you said this, but I wasn't totally clear on this. You want to like them a little.
Yep.
They're not going to be your best friend. You don't need to like them a lot, but you need to feel like they have their shit together and they know what they're doing. And you want to see where they work. Is it in a mini mall or is it in an office? And by the way, it could be great in a mini mall because maybe you're not paying the fees for somebody to be renting an expensive Century City office. It has to work for you. And I would always say, if possible, meet with a couple people if you can.
Yeah.
And if they have no time to meet with you, maybe that's not a good sign.
Yeah, well, that makes sense too. Yeah, for sure.
Some people do charge for an initial consultation. We don't. I would try to find somebody that didn't because I think that also says something. I get it. You don't want to waste your time sitting with people that aren't going to hire you. But at the same time, I think it's just important to get the lay of the land and really get the vibe.
Right, right. Okay. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours about divorce. Then we're going to start. We would start getting into my own personal things. So I better cut it now. But Laura, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of My Life Online. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow, rate, and review, and also share it with a friend so we can continue making great episodes for you. You can also find me on social media. I'm at Susan Yara. And if you enjoy beauty, especially skincare, make sure sure to check out my YouTube channel, Mixed Makeup. I'll talk to you soon.